To all my hustlers, dreamers, love dealers, I'm that kind of girl. Work hard, play hard, for my own heart, might just rule the world. I'm on fire, can you feel the heat? You can try to, but you can't stop me.
This is Marcy Burrows and Carol O'Savin hosting the Midlife Mavens podcast, where we chat candidly about sex, love, relationships, and life for women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. We're both psychologists who specialize in relationships and sexuality, but this isn't therapy. Thanks for joining us to discuss the ups and downs of life in the middle. We hope our conversations inspire and empower you.
A quick disclaimer. We're both psychologists who specialize in relationships and sexuality, but this isn't therapy. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional services from a psychologist or other qualified mental health professional. The use of any products or services purchased by you as a result of this podcast does not create a healthcare provider-patient relationship between you and any of the experts affiliated with this podcast. Let's get into today's episode.
So thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to talk about what men need to know about menopause and perimenopause for their partners. If you're in a committed relationship with a woman in her 40s or 50s, there's a good chance that either perimenopause or menopause will touch your life too. So understanding what your partner's going through during this major transition can be helpful for you to support her and to protect the strength of your relationship. So we asked a group of men in our lives what they wanted to know about this stage in women's lives.
That was a fun conversation. And I was really glad that instead of you and I, Marcy, using our own experience of conversations that we've had as the guide for this discussion, I was really glad that we asked, because the guys came up with 5 or 6 or 7 things that they really wanted to know. And all of the guys that we asked had partners who were in this phase of life. So they had either had experience or knew they would be having these kinds of experiences. So they asked a number of questions as we were having these conversations, and that's kind of how we've formatted today's episode. So one of the first questions that the guys came with was, what is it? And I had to chuckle, because while women don't get a lot of education about later, we get a lot of education about puberty and what happens in puberty and getting our menstrual cycles. And we get a lot of education about what happens when we get pregnant and how we navigate all of those things. There's not as much education about what midlife brings, namely the perimenopause transition and menopause. So it was ironic that the guys were saying, what is it? What does that mean? And so we are here to tell you that if you are a guy listening to this, what you need to know, these are the basics, is that perimenopause is the transitional phase before menopause. So it usually occurs for women in their 40s, although as Marcy and I talked in a recent episode, we are starting to see evidence of that happening earlier, sometimes much earlier, the perimenopause transition. And what's happening, why we call it perimenopause, because it is the hormones are starting to shift. Estrogen, progesterone are starting to fluctuate, and that brings with it a number. I read an article recently that said over 100 symptoms of perimenopause and menopause. So the perimenopause transition brings with it quite a number of changes to a woman's life, and those changes, those fluctuations in hormones that are bringing the symptoms, can last from a few months to several years. Menopause, officially, a woman is considered to be in menopause when she has not had her monthly menstrual cycle for 12 months. And lots of women I know will say things like, oh, it's been 7 months since I've had my period, and then I thought I was in menopause, and then I got my period, and you have to start counting over again. It has to be 12 consecutive months of not having your period to indicate that officially that you are in menopause. And then I think the other thing that I would want men to know is that while there are clear biological transitions and shifts and symptoms that occur during this period of time, it often brings with it some very sometimes powerful and intense psychological symptoms and emotional symptoms that come up as well that might actually be more obvious to a man in a relationship with a woman in this phase.
Yeah, and I'd want to add to that too that the the 12 consecutive months applies for a woman who has not had a hysterectomy. But if a woman has had a hysterectomy, then it's a lot more, well, depending on whether or not she has her ovaries. If her ovaries are removed, then she's immediately goes into menopause because the ovaries are not there creating the hormones. But if she keeps her ovaries, it's a lot harder to figure out when, and then you have to rely on blood work to figure out what the hormone levels are to officially be considered in menopause once there's the drop in estrogen.
Thank you. That's a good point. That for women who have had hysterectomies, me as one example, we don't know. My surgeon left my ovaries when I had my hysterectomy for the stated intention of a more gentle entry into menopause. I was 53 or 54 when I had my hysterectomy. So she wanted me to be able to have a gentler transition into menopause than for them to take my ovaries. But the only way for me to know that was based on symptoms. And that was a lot harder to sort out than a woman who has a very clear physiological marker of, I'm in menopause now.
Yeah, yeah, and I had this same situation where I had a hysterectomy and my ovaries were left, and yeah, I was told by a gynecologist about a year ago that, oh, yep, definitely officially now, but it took almost 10 years until I officially was considered in menopause after a hysterectomy.
Yeah, that just makes it more challenging. Which sort of brings us to the next thing that the guys asked, which was what would I notice is happening for my partner, my wife, my mother, anybody, any woman in midlife? What would I notice is happening? What are the signs and symptoms that I should be alert for? And one of the clear signs and symptoms, if a man is even aware of this, would be irregular or missed periods for the woman. That is one of the first things that alerts a woman to the fact that she's in perimenopause, which is her cycle becomes really irregular.
Hot flashes. And this one, my partner, he knows when I'm having hot flashes. He'll tell me sometimes before I'm even quite aware. He'll touch my skin and go, "Oh, you got a hot flash coming on." Like he can tell. And I swear hot flashes are like, you know how people, what's it called? Spontaneous combustion. I swear that's what a hot flash probably feels like. It's miserable. But yeah, hot flashes and night sweats. So if your partner's waking up and having to change her nightgown in the middle of the night and the sheets are soaked and she's
Yes.
probably freezing from a fan that might be on, it's a good chance that she's in perimenopause.
Which contributes to when that's happening at night, the I don't know if this is accurate. The complaint that I hear the most from the perimenopausal women in my life is their sleep has just gone to hell. They are waking up almost always between 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. And while they maybe have a history of waking up to go to the bathroom or something, they can always go back to sleep. In the perimenopause transition, often women will say they can't get back to sleep. So they'll wake up for whatever reason. Maybe it's night sweats, maybe it's to use the bathroom, and then they're just awake. And so sleep becomes really erratic, not restful, not sufficient to help them do the things that they need to be doing in their lives. And especially when a woman has, and this was me, I sort of prided myself on being a great sleeper. I always slept really well until perimenopause. And then I stopped sleeping, and it would drive me bad. Like I would get so angry about the fact that I could not get a good night's sleep. It was
Mhm.
really frustrating. So that's a
Was it the
clear
same time every day? Was it the same time every night? Like, I would have
yes.
3 o'clock, and still to this day, if I'm gonna wake up, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, I can't
Yes, it
like
was
clockwork,
always
and
it was like 3:24 or something. I was like,
mhm.
I would dread waking up. And on the other side of it, I would dread when I woke up and I looked at the clock and it said 3:24. But I would also get very excited if I happened to wake up earlier than that. It was only like midnight. I would be like, woohoo, I still have 6 hours to sleep.
Yeah.
That little,
And then
little
so
pleasures are important during
yes.
perimenopause and menopause.
Yes. And so you can only imagine if just the first 3 we mentioned. So you got the hot flashes, you got sleep disturbance, periods are irregular. So hormones have a huge impact on your mood. But even if it wasn't for the hormone shifts you're going through, just those things alone are annoying and make you irritable. Not getting enough sleep, feeling hot all the time. So yeah, lots of mood swings, irritability, and increased anxiety, which also the more anxious you feel, the more hot flashes you have. So there's this kind of cycle
And
that
the less
goes.
that you're sleeping.
Yeah.
So it can sometimes
Yeah.
be almost difficult to tell which came first. Are you not sleeping because you're having hot flashes or night sweats? Are you not sleeping because of all this anxiety that you've got? And for a lot of women, you and I talked about this in a recent episode, I think, so many women in the early perimenopause transition experience just this huge fluctuation in their anxiety that becomes
Mhm.
really disorienting for the woman who maybe didn't previously think of herself as somebody who struggled with a lot of anxiety. And so all of those things become this vicious cycle of I don't know why I'm not sleeping. I don't know why I'm irritable. I don't know why I'm anxious, but I feel like my body is kind of betraying me in some ways in that regard.
Yeah. And then another common symptom, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, but this is kind of important for our partners to be aware of, is that there's a lower libido that frequently happens with perimenopause and menopause. The decrease in estrogen and decrease in testosterone really impacts sex drive. And so you may notice that even if your spouse had a very high sex drive or more comparable sex drive to yours earlier in your relationship now, it may feel more mismatched. Or if you had a mismatch to begin with, it may feel even more exacerbated at this stage.
And part of that is the hormonal changes. Part of it is also what I just said about feeling betrayed by our bodies and not feeling comfortable with what's happening. And we talked in a previous episode about vaginal dryness and skin dryness. Our skin dries out,
Yeah.
our ear canals get dry and itchy. And so many women are feeling maybe unusually disconnected from their bodies, not understanding what's happening and being frustrated and not being able to correct what's happening, that also creates some disinterest in sexual
Yeah.
relationship. Because I know when I was having hot flashes, like, don't touch me. I'm hot enough.
Right.
Don't touch me. Hard to
Yeah.
enjoy sex if you don't want to be touched.
Right. And if you're so uncomfortable in your own skin, you don't really want somebody else's skin up against yours either. Like it just, yeah.
The other symptom that I think comes up during this period of time that particularly I think men are likely to notice is what we typically call brain fog or memory issues. It's not like cognitive impairment that comes with later end of life kinds of stuff or Alzheimer's or anything like that, but it is fuzzy. Women will describe it as kind of a fuzziness. They just feel like they can't think clearly or in the way that they're used to being able to think. They can't remember things the way that they used to be able to remember them. And that also, like we were just saying, contributes to that awful cycle of frustration and irritability and discontent, and which creates more sleep disturbance and more memory issues and brain fog and struggles in that domain. So there can be emotional, physiological, cognitive challenges that come during the perimenopause, menopause experience for women.
Yeah. And if you happen to have a partner who has ADHD or has a pre-existing mood disorder, those things are going to be exacerbated during this phase of life as well. So if it's something that's already been a part of your relationship and that you have a spouse with some mental health concerns that are pre-existing, they frequently will be exacerbated during menopause or perimenopause as well.
One of the things
So,
that I think it can be helpful for a man to know at this period of time is that in these kinds of dynamics that we're discussing, that we're talking about, a lot of the emotional reactivity gets directed toward the spouse or the partner because they're the safe person, they're the safe place in a woman's life. And I have heard many men say, I don't understand why she's all of a sudden so irritable toward me or so annoyed at me. And I think the piece that I would want men to know about this is it's probably not as personal as it feels. I recognize that it feels personal and it feels like you can do no right. But most of what you're seeing is probably driven by a biological shift that perhaps your partner isn't aware of or hasn't figured out how to navigate as well yet because it's new.
so and then another thing, which we've kind of touched on this a little bit, is fatigue or lack of energy. And that, comes from the sleep issues, the mood swings, anxiety, all of that's exhausting. And so there's oftentimes a lot more fatigue or a lack of energy.
We wanted to briefly interrupt the episode today and remind you that Marcy and I are both psychologists and would be happy to consider working with you if it seemed like it would be helpful. If any of the content that we've talked about in any of our episodes brings up issues that you would like to explore with a psychologist, we want to make sure that you all have our contact information.
If you're interested in working with either one of us, we both offer 15-minute consultations to assess if it seems like would be a good fit for your therapeutic needs. You can go to my website, which is Marcy, M-A-R-C-I, Burroughs, B-U-R-R-O-U-G-H-S, P-H-D, C-S-T.com, or Carol's website, which is drosaben.com, drosaben.com. We also have our websites in the YouTube channel notes for this episode. And now back to our episode.
So that sort of brings us to the question of if these are the kinds of things that you're seeing and you're a male in a relationship with somebody in her midlife who might be experiencing these kinds of things, you might wonder how you could talk to your partner about that without fearing the ire that might come from you saying something like, why are you being so grumpy these days? Which might not get a great response from a woman who's feeling grumpier than usual. So I would just want to remind you, if you're in that situation, about the importance of being curious about what's happening with your partner rather than being critical of what's happening with your partner. Instead of saying something like, why are you so grumpy lately? You might try saying something like, I've noticed some changes that seem different, and I'm wondering how you're feeling and if there's anything that I could do to support you. So to be curious with your partner about what's happening for them. I remember very clearly sharing with somebody in my life that they had maybe been a little more irritable as they were nearing the menopause transition. And they were shocked to hear me say that. They didn't think that they were feeling all that irritable. Like there was a lack of awareness about that. So you being curious, you as a man in that situation being curious, or even a female partner, we've talked about
Mhm.
relationships where there's a big age difference, where your older female partner might be going through it well before you are as a younger female partner. So being curious about that, inquiring
Yeah,
compassionately and empathetically with your partner is
yeah.
important.
Using I statements and open-ended questions are great ways to show empathy and, an I statement with a feeling word from you, like, I'm concerned. I've noticed some changes lately. So kinda adding in your feeling. An I statement, though, you can't say, you know, "I think you've been more moody lately." That's a cheating on your I statement. So you can't flip it into the "Why are you so moody?" by sticking the I first. I have a lot of clients who try to get away with I I feel like you're being moody lately. That doesn't work. But I'm concerned that I'm noticing some changes lately. And the questions that Carol said about how are you feeling or how can I support you are wonderful open-ended questions that are going to invite conversation versus just a are you feeling okay? That's going to get a yes or a no and not really open up the conversation with her.
One of the dynamics that we see a lot between men and women, and this is very societal, I think, very societally generated or driven, is that men tend to be problem solvers and solution focused when it comes to concerns that their partner, spouse might be dealing with. And I would encourage men in these kinds of conversations to really resist the urge to jump into fixing it. Instead of saying, I'm concerned, I'm noticing some things have been different, I'm wondering how you're feeling, what can we do to fix it, can come across as being more judgmental than supportive. And so trying to stay focused on the emotions that your partner might be sharing with you rather than jumping to try to find some solution can be helpful as well.
So I think the next question that you got was somebody wanted really specific ways to help support a partner. So kind of piggybacking on what we were just talking about, what are ways that you can be supportive and curious? And so we've got 5 specific ways to support your partner. And the first one is to educate yourself. So there's a growing body of information out there. Thankfully, they're starting to do more research on perimenopause and menopause. So there's a lot out there now that you can read. There's other podcasts that are focused on menopause. There's TV shows that are being done recently. There was an Oprah special we talked about on another podcast that was really a wonderful resource. So educate yourself about the changes that your partner's going through.
And when you do feel like you're on the receiving end of some of those changes, it's important to, I think, be flexible and be patient, knowing that over time and with support, you and your partner will figure out how to navigate these changes, just like maybe you've navigated other changes in the course of your relationship, job changes or having children or having an empty nest, whatever those might have been. Because of the symptoms, some of the symptoms that Marcy and I have shared, her your partner's energy and mood and sex drive are likely to fluctuate. And so being patient, trying not to take it personally, can go a long way toward helping your partner to feel supported rather than criticized or judged.
I think it's easy to think, well, she's mad at me for some reason, or to think she's just being a bitch, and to kind of unhook from those thoughts, even though they still might pop in your head. But being able to recognize, okay, this is really not about me. This is about transitions that she's going through, and being able to be open and curious with her and supportive with her, even if some of the things that you may be experiencing feel hurtful or kind of hurt your feelings a little bit.
Marcy, you might have some more experience from your practice with this because of your work with couples, but the loss of libido that a lot of women experience during the perimenopause transition can really create challenges in the relationship when it comes to a healthy sex life. So that is another place where we think it's important. A specific thing that a man could do in that situation to support their partner in perimenopause would be to take the expectations out of the equation and maybe let your partner take the lead. If you're the one who tends to initiate sexual activity, maybe let your partner take the lead in determining what she's comfortable with at any particular moment in time. Is there more that you want to say about that?
Yeah, I think that's a place that patience is really important. The more pressured she feels, the less likely she is going to want to have sex. And if you kind of think about sex drive on a scale of -10 to +10, and your drive may not have changed at all throughout your lifetime, and so you may still be coming in the positive most of the time. Most men maintain spontaneous desire, but if your wife is somewhere in the negative because of all this stuff going on and not experiencing any drive right now, your attempts at trying to initiate with her are probably going to bring her in the opposite direction. And so finding ways to communicate about when is she more amenable to sex, when is there some desire for her, when is she at a 0 or higher and not really initiating sex or pursuing sex if she's somewhere in the negative on that scale. Because usually if she's feeling somewhere on the negative, your attempts are going to take her further down the scale. Even things that if she were in a positive on that scale would take her in the positive direction are going to be things that still take her in the negative. So an example I use, I have a lot of clients where men will spontaneously just grab a boob in the kitchen. You're doing the dishes and there's a boob grab that happens and they're thinking they're being flirty. But if you have a woman who's focused on doing the dishes, she's just had a hot flash, she's like feeling at a -5 on that scale, she's going to go to a -10, where even if that's something previously she would have liked, and some women don't like that at all at any point, and some women do. Everybody's different. But if it's something that maybe she used to like when her drive was different, it's going to probably be something that's more aversive to her now. And that's really hard and confusing to understand when that's not how it used to be.
And that's where, back to our conversation about how to talk to your partner about these kinds of changes, rather than being annoyed at the changes, to be curious, to be compassionate about, now that you've educated yourself about what might be going on for your partner, you can be compassionate with her about how you can still be engaged and connected even when you're not having sex because of how she's feeling or what she's struggling with. And along with being able to be affectionate without making demands and putting a lot of pressure on your partner, the other thing that changes for a lot of women as they go through perimenopause is they gain weight. The changes in the hormones change our metabolism and make it difficult for some women, not all women, some women to lose weight in the way or stay in shape the way that they would like to. If they're having really bad sleep, they don't feel like getting up to exercise. So it can be really helpful for a man to support the healthy habits that their wife is trying to practice to counteract some of these things that might be happening in perimenopause. So doing what you can to encourage good sleep hygiene to help her get a good night's sleep, doing what you can to help the couple eat healthy, exercise, keep the stress as low as possible so that you're not nagging them about those things. You probably would not want to say anything about weight gain to your partner ever, let alone when they're in perimenopause. Right. But encouraging activities that you might do together as a way of connecting that would also be supporting healthy behaviors for your partner.
Yeah, and that is a challenging balance, I think, to word that in a way that comes across as curiosity and supportive and staying away from the nagging part of it, that saying, how can I support you in this? And if, she's complaining about weight gain or things like that, then offering, hey, what can I do to help you with that? What would you find supportive? Because I do think that's a hard one to word, in terms of not coming across as if you're being critical or judgmental. And yeah.
And one of the nicest ways, I think, to word that is for you to invite your partner with you to do a healthy thing. You can be the one to say, I'd like to go for a walk after dinner. Do you want to go for a walk with me? To encourage that healthy behavior for yourself and invite your partner to be a party to that activity, as opposed to saying, I think maybe you should you ate a lot at dinner, maybe you should go for a walk. That's not going to go over as well.
Another thing that could be really helpful is offering to go to appointments with her. If she's going to an appointment to find out more about what's happening with her body, offering to be there for support, or being open to doing that if she wants that, for you to be a part of the appointments to get educated yourself.
Agreed. I think that's an easy one. And maybe your partner won't want it, but it shows that you're aware and that you care about her well-being, and that you've educated yourself, that you know that there might be doctor's appointments to help navigate some of this. And if you can be there, even if you're just sitting in the waiting room, that can be seen as a real show of support by your partner.
So, one of the questions you got, Carol, was, when will this end? And that's a tough one for us to answer. We're going to have a psychiatrist who specializes in menopause on our show for a few guest appearances in the future. And this is a question that we're going to bring up with her as well, because we've seen where perimenopause can be anywhere from 2 to 10 years. And then when women transition into menopause, that frequently some of the symptoms that we just talked about will subside, but we're really not sure. Part of it is because it's out of our scope. We're not medical doctors. But the other part is that there's not been a lot of research, and thankfully there's more that's starting now, but there's a lot that we don't necessarily have answers to. And so we're going to talk with our guest in a few weeks about this question, and hopefully she'll be able to have some more insight into that answer. Or maybe she'll have to say that there's a lot of research that hasn't been done yet.
And I think there's just so much variability. It's just hard to know. There is no, just like the symptoms of menopause are different for every woman, how long they might persist, how they might impact a woman as she enters menopause and is in the menopause stage of her life for the remainder of her life. Again, because there's not a lot of research, it's just hard to know what that might look like. Generally speaking, we do see a lot of the symptoms abate as a woman enters menopause and beyond. But again, so much variability. We'll ask our medical expert if she's aware of research that speaks specifically to that, but be open and flexible for whatever might come your way. We don't know how long it will last for your particular partner, and your particular partner doesn't know how long it will last for her either. So if you can, the more help and support that you can provide during this period of time, the more likely you are to see things abate and not become such huge issues.
Mm-hmm. So I think, to summarize this whole episode, I think, first of all, if you have listened through this whole episode, I think you're on the right track, because you're showing interest and curiosity, and you're seem to be a supportive partner because you're wanting to get this information. So that's awesome. And I encourage you to keep getting information and use those I statements and open-ended questions with your partner, and just have lots of patience and support and love for her as both of you go through this transition together.
I think that's the key. Yeah. So we hope that that's been helpful. If you're a man listening to our episode, or you're a woman who is in a relationship with a man and wants to give this episode link to one of the men in your life so they know what's going on, we hope that it's been helpful to both educate you and give you some ideas about how you can support the midlife maven in your life.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll hopefully see you next time.
Thanks for being here. This has been Marcy Burrows and Carol O'Sabin with the Midlife Mavens podcast. As psychologists, we are big advocates for therapy. If anything in today's conversation left you feeling like there is more that you would like to explore, we encourage you to pursue therapy. In today's episode notes, we've listed links for several directories you could use to find a therapist who's a good fit for you. Thanks for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you in a future episode. Be sure to visit our Midlife Mavens Facebook page to share your ideas about future conversations.